Amazing. And I see people already joining in the audience. So, hey to the 97 folks in the audience right now. Nick, welcome to Discord. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So I want to give a quick intro and then we'll dive into the Q&A. So as many of you guys know, Nick is a co-creator, executive producer, and star of the animated Netflix series Big Mouth, in addition to so many other shows and movies we love, including The Kroll Show, Sausage Party, Sing, and more. You know, he grew up in Rye, New York. And Nick, I got to tell you, man, I was stunned to find out that we both went to Salman Schechter Jewish School, where we played on our basketball team. So I got to say, though, I'm pretty excited that you chose comedy over sports for the sake of all of us and all the work that you've done since then.
I don't know if my body gave me much of a choice, but to go into comedy. Did you go to the lower school or the upper school?
I went to the Salman Schechter in Chicago. You went into New York,
Oh,
and I don't know if this is during your time or after, but we had like these like basketball tournaments, and it was probably the nerdiest rivalry of all time. But that was the peak of my sports career as well.
me too. But yeah, because if you would have gone to my school in White Plains, the walls were incredibly close to the backboards, and in like seventh, eighth grade, I definitely ran back to try to block a shot and ran headfirst into the wall and got knocked out. So, um, but maybe that's what made me go into comedy eventually.
Yeah, maybe that was the turning point. I see about 100 people in the audience, and it's growing. And I just want to give a quick overview of how the next 30 or so minutes will flow. For the first 10 to 15 minutes, I'll be asking Nick questions about the newest season of Big Mouth, which will debut on November 5th. Its spin-off series, Human Resources, and just getting a take on Nick's career in comedy and going behind the scenes in a way that we haven't seen. Nick, I've watched just about all of your interviews. I've gone through so much of the work that you've put out over the past few years. And I want to ask you questions that you don't often get asked, and hopefully it just sparks a conversation that goes a bit deeper than some of the interviews you may have done in the past.
Great. Well, you're starting off well by asking about my Salman Schechter point guard basketball career.
We had to go for the deep cuts. And then for the remaining 10 to 15 minutes after that, I'll be asking questions that we've gotten from the members of this Netflix Discord with this server of about 27,000 people, which is run by Hazed over here. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And so, Nick, if that Salman Schechter reference was a throwback, just wait till you hear some of the ways where we've researched your past, and we're going into the Q&A here. And I thought I'd start things off. You know, the New York Times called you the Picasso of puberty because how you
Hmm.
turned the ups and downs from your high school into, you know, what is now your character of Nick on Big Mouth. And I wanted to ask right off the bat, how would you say you're most similar to the animated version of Nick that we see on the show, and how are you most different?
Um, well, I think that is a good question. I don't think I've gotten that one. Which I think it's that like Nick on the show, I was a very late bloomer. I didn't grow pubes until I was basically like going into high school. I was under 5 feet by when I entered high school. So I think we share that in common. I think Nick is like everything is heightened. It's an animated show, so like Nick is probably a little more of a prick than I was. It's more like now looking back at myself, it's the worst version of it. Um, and I think on top of that, then we created this character Nick Star, which is this version of Nick in the future, who's a 40-something kind of comedian, but really game show host, which is a truly the worst version of who I could be. In like scared of intimacy, scared of connection, scared deeply self-involved, and fake, just a really false person. So I hope that I'm not too much like Nick Star, but I definitely have drawn elements of myself now and from the past for both Nick Birch and Nick Star.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, you know, it's not easy, like taking those, ups and downs from your, teenage years, those prepubescent years, and turning into comedy. And I know that after you graduated Georgetown in 2002, you moved to New York and got a job at a public school teaching comedy to middle school kids. And I'm curious, like,
Hmm.
what are some of those lessons that you taught them that you now put into practice, when writing Big Mouth or writing this upcoming spinoff series of human resources to
Um,
make your jokes funnier and to really turn that into a laugh?
well, I think, it was interesting. You definitely, I think, always learn a lot when you try to teach. In the case of me teaching stand up and improv to middle school kids, that was really when I was just starting doing stand up and improv myself. And I think what I taught them to do, it actually took me many, many years to take my own advice, which was, you know, draw from your own life, take your experiences and turn that into material. Like, when I would tell the kids, like, tell me about what do you eat for breakfast, what are your parents like, what's your favorite, like, subject in school, what's your least favorite subject in school, and they would tell me that, and then we would build jokes around that. And it really took me till doing Big Mouth, where probably it's my most autobiographical work to date, to really understand how impactful talking about my own story, from childhood, and how much people responded to that, and how rewarding that was going to be, both in the success of the show, but also personally, and like therapeutically, just to try to understand yourself through your art, by being like, all right, well, what was my childhood like? What did that mean? How did I react to that friendship, or how did I have a crush on that girl, and what did that mean for how I treated my relationships going forward? So I have found the lesson that I tried to impart to those kids, like, almost 20 years ago, is incredible. It was ended up being much incredibly helpful to do in Big Mouth, but it took me a long time to kind of take my own lesson.
That makes sense. I'm curious, if we had to fast forward it to present day, how do you think those lessons now, hit the folks you're working with in your writers' rooms? I've heard you have, a set of rules, like no screens, no phones in the writers' room. You try to run them from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. What are those ways that, because you lived your childhood, and obviously people weren't walking in your shoes when you were growing up. How do you share those experiences in your writers' room to then try to turn them into the storylines that we see on Big Mouth and now Human Resources coming up?
Well, I think, it's based on me and Andrew Goldberg's life, and Andrew and I grew up together. We're best friends for many, many years in middle school and beyond, and then he went on to write for Family Guy, and then we came together to make Big Mouth with Mark Levin and Jen Flackett. And it was really on Andrew and I early on to share our stories, and be um completely open with our writers room, to say, like, this is what, like, Andrew, really, in the first episode of Big Mouth, Andrew dances with Missy and comes in his pants. That really happened to Andrew. Andrew had a mustache in 6th or 7th grade, and his father couldn't stand it, and he made his mom wax his upper lip. That happened to Andrew. I did get pants in 7th grade, and was exposed to this girl I had a crush on. So we put that in the show. And then also, what we're feeling now. What are the things that who we are still to this day? It was really on us to share that. Which, because if we're not going to share our stories of, leading to our life, how could we ever expect our writers to then open up and share their stories, the intimate details of their adolescence and also their current life? And it really was sort of a lead by example. And then our writers have been amazing, about sharing their stories, their experiences. And the further we've gotten into the show, it started off obviously about me and Andrew's life, and some other stories based on friends of ours, loosely based on kids that we grew up with. But as the show has gone on, we've tried to tell more people's stories, and points of view that aren't originally, set from the original, two straight white Jewish guys. And then we really leaned on our writers, and our writers who represent other points of view, to share their stories, so that we can get it right. And luckily, we chose writers who were excited to get in there and tell their stories and advocate and push us to tell more broad-reaching stories and try to tell them right in a way that they hadn't seen on screen before. And that is super exciting and at times challenging, and trying to get it right, and trying to have a really kind of open dialogue with our writers to try to tell good stories.
Yeah, I could see that. Like you setting the tone by being vulnerable and sharing those embarrassing stories from your high school days and growing up really sets the tone for other people to feel comfortable. And that's how it sounds like you get some of these storylines. And I wanted to think about and ask about, as you look at season 5 coming up, I know the theme is love and hate. You're introducing love bugs and hate worms into the narrative. And I'm curious, Nick, if you could talk about, do you think about the themes of a season on a whole before things get started? Or is it that you write episode by episode, and then once you reach the conclusion of a season, you're like, you know what, let's start to go back and workshop some of the themes that this season could be about and stand for, and get to that idea of love and hate like this season 5 is going to be about?
I think it really, we after a season, we round up, and think about what we liked or what we didn't like, and then the show comes out. But we're always like well over a year. We always write, like, season 4 came out last December. We had already finished season 5 by the time season 4 came out. So we're always kind of reacting to our own bellwether inside of it, and we come in with a theme before we write the season, and then we use that theme as the tentpole to build stories around that idea. Season 2, we had shame. We introduced the shame wizard, and that became a unifying theme for the season. And then season 3, we didn't really have that. We just hadn't quite zeroed in that we wanted a theme. And when it came out, we realized that we missed it. And so for season 4, we came in knowing that we wanted Andrew. I believe it was Andrew came in thinking about anxiety, and really thinking that that was a storyline, a unifying theme to build around. And it proved itself to be very rich. And then season 5. We came in thinking about, I can't remember if it started as love and then it became love and hate, but I think as we started to write it, then we understood that love and hate, represented by these love bugs who could also be hate worms, became something that felt very rich, as again I said, like a kind of a unifying thematic idea for us to then generate the stories that our characters were going through, and being able to, like, know we could sort of lean on those ideas as a way to build, like, stories for our characters.
And then building off that, take me through, Nick, how do you think about a spin-off like human resources? And I got to tell you, man, we got so many questions about the spin-off. Like a few people were, on the edge of their seats. Like we saw a trailer and a teaser in 2019. We've been waiting
Yeah.
for it. So, so I'm curious, how do you think about, it's interesting to hear you talk about episode by episode, season by season of Big Mouth.
Hmm.
How do you think of a spin-off series and differentiating that while maintaining some of the same themes and characters? We'd love to hear you talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the spin-off, we went up to the workplace of the monsters at the end of season 2, and we saw where
Hmm.
they worked, and we always like to do in the finale episode something different and go somewhere new. And season 1 was the pornscape, season 2 was the human resources where the monsters worked, and so on and so
Hmm.
forth. And then I think I can't remember the exact timeline, but we realized, like, oh wow, there could be a spinoff in the work monsters workplace, as we started to realize, like, oh, the shame wizard and the hormone monsters and the depression kitties, and we realized we were building this cadre of other, emotions that and creatures and monsters that represented different elements of these kids' lives. And then once we realized we had those characters, we realized how fun it would be to do kind of a workplace comedy for them, but also that they could then go back down to earth and talk about all the other stories that don't make sense for Big Mouth, which is really a show about kids going through puberty, about adolescence, and the beginning of sexual human development. So when you now doing a show about human resources, where you can have these creatures dealing with people who are giving birth, who are dying, who are getting divorced, who are deciding to buy a car, trying to go back to work after having a baby, all the things that are part of the human experience but fall outside of the purview of puberty. So it made us one realize like there's so many of these human stories that Big Mouth, wasn't right for, because there's so many stories we wanted to tell specifically about these kids. And also
Mm.
we could then just also do a workplace comedy, like the Office, like, which is so fun. It's just so fun to be able to like see what are Maury and Connie like at the office, um having nothing to do with a human story, like a plot line down in the real world or the regular world.
Yeah. What can you tease? It's just if, about the upcoming spin-off Human Real. But is there anything that you could tease about storylines, like the things that we could look forward to? I know a lot of people are looking forward to. I'm wondering what else you could say about it to help build up some of that anticipation.
Oh, I mean, I honestly don't know, like like whether legally or not. We haven't dropped any trailers or teaser. I mean, I will say our cast, we announced. I think we announced the entire cast. I don't know if
Mm.
someone on here can tell me what I'm allowed to say or not. Uh, and um, let's see. I can tell you that the full time cast is insane. Some of whom we have seen in Big Mouth. Um, Obviously, me and Maya reprise our roles, and some of the other hormone monsters we've seen on Big Mouth already, as well as these love bugs who are going to be introduced this coming season on season 5 of Big Mouth. Big season 5 of Big Mouth, with the introduction of like love bugs and hate worms, is really kind of sets the table for a lot of the characters and things happening in human resources. And then we have a insane group of guest stars, some of which we're finishing up season 1, like the color and cleaning everything up, and I'm now
Mm.
watching the final cuts of things, and there's like a couple performances and guest stars that people are gonna shit their brains, uh, not shit their pants or blow their minds, but shit their brains out. It's
Thank you for that
crazy,
visual.
and
Yes, yeah.
yes, and it's like I mean, it's crazy. And again, I will say you're just going to see a lot more different kinds of stories. I am incredibly excited for people to see human resources, because I think if you like Big Mouth, you will come to human resources and continue to find like the funny, very dirty, risky kind of jokes. But there's also, because you're not only dealing with kids, that you're dealing with other elements of human experience, really emotional. Um, I hope stories and storylines and kinds of people that you haven't really seen or experienced before. And I think it will feel both very complimentary to Big Mouth, but also very much its own show. And it's, I mean, I'm like, again, some of the performances are insane. And the Shame Wizard, I mean, you'll see a bunch of the, like David Thewlis is the Shame Wizard, is in The Office, and nobody likes him up in human resources either. But it's a crazy, crazy collection of characters, is what I can say.
Yeah, and I think that tees up such a wonderful question from our audience, from Matt is loading. Shout out to Matt is loading, who wanted to know who's the hardest character that you have to perform without laughing.
Um, the hardest character to perform without laughing, you know, I mean, Rick's voice, and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to understand. Like, I'll pitch jokes in Rick's voice, and everyone will be like, especially over Zoom, everyone's like, "Can you repeat that 4 or 5 times?" And we have to make sure that it then um gets added into. It's like it's a very hard thing for people to understand. Um, Coach Steve is always kind of fun and so dumb that he can make me laugh sometimes, and getting the math of how stupid he is can sometimes be slightly confusing. I think I said it in a panel, and now it's my one of my favorite Coach Steve saying, and I don't think it's been made it to the show, which is, you know, at the end of the day, it's night, which for Coach Steve is a pretty profound. And just going back quickly to I'm getting a sense from Netflix, like, who I'm allowed to talk about, but
Mhm.
Pam Adlon plays a love bug who, I don't know if you guys have watched her show Better Things on FX, but also she was on King of the Hill, and is like kind
Mm.
of a voiceover legend, and is really terrific on the show. And Brandon Kyle Goodman, who has been a writer on Big Mouth, is an incredibly talented performer, and he's a love bug on he's a love bug on Big Mouth that then will transition over to Human Resources, as well as Kiki Palmer, who's another one of our love bugs, and is insanely funny and talented. And those are just a couple of the names of people, and there will be more coming. But um, uh, it's a very, very funny group of people.
That's an insane lineup. I'm curious
Yeah.
because there's such a difference between, a lot of these folks like do in-person work versus voice acting for these shows. How do you guys workshop different voices? Is that people come in with an idea of what they want a character to sound, especially you, Nick, you voice so many different characters. Like, how do you think about making those sound different and workshopping them over time? Like, how does that work for those of us who aren't in the voice acting industry?
Um, so oftentimes first instinct is the right one for me personally.
Mm.
It'll be like, hey, we need to do, again, I've said this before, but when we were developing the show, Andrew, Mark, and Jen were like, we think Andrew should have a hormone monster, and I immediately was like, touch yourself, Andrew. And that came very quickly, and then it was like, Coach Steve should have a hormone monster, and it became, wow, oh man, that sounds true, baby. Lola, I had done some version of on Kroll show with publicity. So we kind of like, I had done some version of that girl before, but like then she becomes their own person, So like Lola, all the voices, then I continue to find, hopefully, the nuances and particulars that weren't always there at the beginning. We have early tests of characters and drawings, and you can see how not only the physical drawings of these characters change, but also the the performances vocally change, and find new elements throughout.
Do you have a favorite character that you love voicing that kind of brings out that teenager in you when you go back to it? I'm curious if there's anyone behind the scene that brings you a bit more joy and creativity than the others.
Um, my cheesy answer is really the true one, which is I really it's really whatever character I'm doing is my favorite one, because it's and most episodes you know, I'm doing at the very least Maury the Hormone Monster, Nick, Rick, Coach Steve, Lola, and then there's so I mean Lola, for some reason, is Lola has become the arc of Lola is one of my favorite things about the show. I think, I always enjoyed doing her, but I think season one, either people were like, she's annoying or whatever it was. And then over time, I think people have really gotten on the Lola train, and that makes me really, really happy because I find her to be, and especially on last season on the show, like she and Jay's characters, these two like lonely kids with no family support and really find each other, and they're just so emotional. And anyway, so I have a lot of love for Lola in particular, um, and and I find her fun to improvise with, and Coach Steve is always fun, and truly like Nick is the most weird way the most challenging because he's when you're like it's like when you watch I don't know if this is going to make sense, but when you watch like How I Met Your Mother, or you're like Josh Radnor's character, or like New Girl, and it's like Jake Johnson's character. The people who are at the center of the show, who have to kind of like drive story, don't always get to do the most fun stuff. They're important to the show, but they don't always get the most like comedic stuff to play with. And so it can be weirdly challenging because Nick has to like drive so much of the story. And yet it is me, so I'm theoretically quite biased by it, but it's a weird yeah, it's strange. He can sometimes be the most difficult one for me to get into because it's just more fun to be characters.
Yeah, I would have not expected you to say that. The one that may be closest to you is like the hardest to voice, but that makes sense because there's a bit more. I guess you have to dig deeper into your background to be able to find what's true and what's authentic when you're bringing it to the character of Nick.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm going through like other audience questions that have come in. And this one from a fan by the name of Bag, that's his username. He wants to know, how do you feel about the fact that many teens are comforted by a show like Big Mouth as they themselves go through puberty?
Well, thanks, Bag. Um, it's thrilling. Like it's my favorite thing about the show. The response. Like we made the show trying to make ourselves laugh, and at its core, it's a show about what our experiences were like then. But as the show has evolved over time, our goal has been to not only look back at what our experiences were, but also now really try to talk about what kids' experiences are today. And the fact that I was surprised, when the first season came out, and it was like there were, and then I was surprised that kids the age of the kids in the show were watching it, and then I was like, well, of course they would watch it. It's like about them. So it that makes me really happy, and if kids feel like kind of seen, um, then that's the most pleasing thing about it is like that, because my goal, even before we realized whether kids would watch it or not, was to make people feel like a little less alone, because puberty is
Mm,
it's such a lonely experience, and you feel like what's happening to you nobody understands, and it's hard to talk to other people about. And so if we made a show that talked about the things that nobody was talking about, that hopefully then made everybody feel, looking back, like, oh, other people are going through this. Or if you're a kid now, being like, oh, this is all happening to other people, like maybe I'm not like a total weirdo or a total freak, and that to me that's a very gratifying feeling.
yeah, I was gonna say I wish the show existed when I was going through my teenage years, and I love how open you are, not just in relaying stories from your teenage years to the show, but also how openly you talk about it on Twitter and social media. I put this photo in the chat that I found of you at your prom,
Yeah.
which you look much more dapper than I did. I got to tell you that, man.
Oh, that was by senior year of high school. So I was at the beginning of high school. I was probably that's my friend Tatiana. I was probably up. I was probably around her nose at the beginning of high school. So, um, so that was years after really trying to get it all together. And that's by senior year, that was about the best I could do. I had grown up my hair. I was really thought I was pretty cool with my long hair at that point. Quite a
And
look.
Nick, you Yeah, definitely. And if you guys want to check it out, go open the Nick's chat server or drop in any questions there. I wanted to also ask Nick, you've had teenagers and people going through their years of puberty that come up to you and mention how much the show has meant to them. I'm wondering in the past year, comedy has been so important in getting us through a pandemic. And I remember this table read that you and the cast of Big Mouth did that just brought so many smiles and laughter to folks. Have people come up to you as well and talked about what the show Big Mouth or your career in comedy has meant to them as we go through so many ups and downs in the world around us and kind of need laughter now more than ever?
Yeah, it's like a weird thing to try to answer that because all you do is kind of sound like I'm like, yeah, what I've done for people is very important. Um, so I can't really like it's an uncomfortable thing to but I think that the last like year and a half again has been so hard for so many people, and everybody was pretty separated, and so whatever we as the show could do or I could do in other ways, um, to give people something to either watch the show and laugh or can just connect, find ways of connection, at a time when I think like it's hard to on some level it's been incredibly hard to connect, and on some other level like this weird year and a half has actually forced people to find other ways to connect, and obviously Discord, I think this is my first time on Discord, but as I now witness it and participate in it, it's like another place for people to really find connection and find community, and like we're all just I think we're all just like starving for connection, and if Big Mouth becomes something that people can use for that, that makes me really happy. And the other stuff I do, whether especially at the beginning of the pandemic when it was like what the fuck is going on, that we were like let's do a live table read, at least that will give something for people to do on a Friday night that will maybe be entertaining and simultaneously raise some money for Feeding America. That would be great, but I can't wait to get back into our writers' room physically, would be with people more and more again, um, and like it's just I think we all need it. I think we all need some real human connection.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I feel like especially now that more than ever. So I don't mean to put you on the spot with that question, but it's really interesting to hear your perspective as it's certainly brought a ton of joy and laughter to folks, and I can't wait for
That's
human resources to come up because I feel like that'll take it to another level.
I think so. I mean, I hope so. I'm really, I'm, it's like I mean, I'm very psyched about this season of Big Mouth season 5. It's going to be, it's again. I hope we continue to try to tell new, interesting, weird, fucked up, nuanced stories on Big Mouth, and then I think human resources will be its own version of it, but open it up even further about the kinds of stories we could tell, and the idea that for us as creators, especially with animation, you work. Animation takes a year and a half, so you work
Mm.
forever for these shows to come out, and then because it's Netflix, they come out, it streams, people watch it, and like over like a weekend or the next week, the next within like the month, everyone's like, great, done, like, and then it's over. And the idea that we have a second show, which allows us to kind of twice a year have this moment where all the work that you've been doing gets to be seen, and you feel the other side of making your art, and having that art then experienced, is really super gratifying. So I'm excited to have two shows for people to kind of bounce back and forth on.
Yeah, can you take us through like what happens in our last few minutes here before we wrap? What happens from like we talked about the writers' room, like you taking inspiration from your adolescence, like what happens like as you guys write the jokes, put the storyline together to the show coming to fruition in that year and a half? Because I think so many people, like you said, just see the end result and binge on it and love it, and then move on. And now we have two of these moments that we could look forward to. But I would love to hear a bit more behind the scenes if you could share.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty lengthy process of, we'll come up with a theme for a season. Like again, let's say season 5 is love and hate. And then we get our writers room together and we start to um, talk about some of the storylines, characters where that we left them, and start to build and think about, just all the big stories that we want to tell for each character. And then we start to outline those stories, send, and our writers then go off to script on them. We'll give them notes, they'll come back with a draft. We'll go to have a table read of that script. We'll do another rewrite based on the table read. Then once that's done, we'll, in the next week and a half after that, we'll start to record the episode. Then that gets edited together in what we call radio play. When
Mm.
you're just hearing the episode, you're just hearing the audio of it. And once that gets approved, and we'll do rewrites on that, then that goes off and gets drawn by our studio Titmouse, all our writers, our directors, and storyboard artists, and they'll do a kind of storyboard out what it looks like. And then that gets built into what we call an animatic, which is like a rough draft, kind of a black and white version of the episode, which that takes a few months to get done, which we'll then screen for our writers and anyone else at the studio to watch. And then we'll do a rewrite based on the animatics of things that make sense, that need clarification, or jokes that aren't working, or storylines that aren't working. So we'll do a rewrite then. Then that goes off to our studios and our animation houses in Korea, where the episodes then are fully drawn and colored in, which takes many, many months. Then we will screen that color episode that comes back from Korea, and we will do another rewrite based on what we're seeing from that, of things that didn't quite translate, or jokes that weren't working, or storylines that still need tweaking. And that all gets done in house in Titmouse. And we do that for 10 episodes. And then obviously color and sound mix and all that stuff. And then we send those finished episodes to Netflix, who then translates it into, I can't remember how many languages for different regions of Netflix, but it's so many. And then it gets uploaded to the server. So it's about over a 70-week period from when we open the writer's room to when it is finished, completed, polished, and done.
That's incredible. And now doing that for 5 seasons, going on 5 seasons, going on a spinoff, it's just amazing to hear. So, I think we have a lot to look forward to on November 5th when season 5 of Big Mouth premieres on Netflix. We have a lot to look forward to with the new spinoff series, Human Resources, that's coming soon. And I just want to say thank you for everyone who made this come to life as part of To Doom, Netflix's first global fan festival. And just say thank you to Nick. Thank you, Nick, for joining, Hazed for hosting us in his Discord, and everyone who asked questions, as well as Uni, Kenny, Sarah, and the folks at Netflix and Discord who made this possible.
Right on. Thank you guys. Thanks for watching, everybody, and listening and doing whatever you do.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Nick,
John.
I'll give you the final word. Of course. Anything else you wanted to add
or
weave in before we wrap here?
I would just say, even if you were a mediocre point guard at a small Jewish day school, anything is possible. But I really do think, like, if you're interested in making stuff, try to talk about your experience, and be vulnerable, and be brave, and almost always out of that you'll make something good. And if not, at least you'll hopefully learn some stuff about yourself.
That's beautifully said. And I think, your vulnerability from just the way you share yourself on social into the writers' rooms and just talking about the process is fascinating. So thank you, Nick. Thank you for continuing to make us laugh. And I'm sure we'll see each other again. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoy the upcoming season of Big Mouth, as well as the spinoff series. And we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, John. Take care, man.
All right, guys. Bye.
Peace.